I'm AnewZ and you are watching AnewZ. Here are the headlines. Criminal investigation into the torture and killing of Azerbaijani citizens in Russia's Yekaterinburg launched. Russia sharply escalates its aerial strikes campaign on Ukraine, launching more than 5,300 drones in June alone. A breakthrough in securing finance for developing nations reached at UN summit in Seville. Thank you for tuning in. Azerbaijani prosecutors opened a criminal investigation into the torture and killing of Azerbaijani citizens in Russia's Yekaterinburg. Forensic authorities have confirmed that those killed during the Russian security operations did not die from gunshot wounds, but from severe head injuries caused by blunt force trauma.
New forensic evidence has revealed how Hussein and Ziyaddin Safarov, two Azerbaijani citizens killed during the Russian security raids in Yekaterinburg, lost their lives. According to the Director General of the Forensic Medical Examination and Pathological Anatomy Union of the Ministry of Health, Adalet Hasanov, neither man suffered gunshot wounds. Instead, both died from severe head injuries caused by blunt force trauma. More precise details have emerged how Ziyaddin Safarov died. Forensic reports state he sustained fractures at the base of the skull and extensive brain injuries leading to fatal traumatic brain damage. The cause of death was determined to be blows inflicted with a hard, blunt object. The two men, originally from Ağdam, Azerbaijan, were killed on the 27th of June during a large-scale operation by Russia's Federal Security Service. The raids targeted multiple homes belonging to Azerbaijani families in Yekaterinburg. Several Azerbaijanis were injured and at least 9 were detained, with some reports suggesting as many as 60 people were arrested. One Azerbaijani who was detained and later released has described being beaten and humiliated by Russian security forces who allegedly entered homes without warrants and seized valuables including cash and gold. Azerbaijan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has condemned the operation as brutal and unjustified. Russia's charge d'affaires in Baku was summoned to receive an official protest. Baku is now demanding a full and transparent investigation into the killings and assurances for the safety and legal rights of Azerbaijani citizens living in Russia. While Russian officials claim the raids were tied to investigations into Syria's past crimes allegedly involving Russian citizens of Azerbaijani origin, they have yet explained the deadly force used during the operation.
The bodies of brothers Ziyaddin and Hussein Safarov, who were killed during a Russian Federal Security Service operation in Yekaterinburg on June 27th, were returned to Azerbaijan's Akjabadi city Tuesday morning for burial.
Today, the bodies of brothers Ziyaddin and Hussein Safarov, who were killed in Yekaterinburg, have been brought to their hometown of Akjabadi for burial. The incident raises both legal and political questions. On June 27, during an operation conducted by Russia's Federal Security Service in the city of Yekaterinburg, 2 Azerbaijani nationals were killed, several others were injured, and 9 individuals were detained.
Russian authorities claim the operation was linked to murders dating back to 2001 to 2011. However, the scale of the raid and testimonies from relatives have sparked outrage and deep concern.
Dünən saat 8 radələrində reyslər, cənazələr ölkəyə gətirildi, Bakı şəhərinə indi.
Yesterday, around 8 a.m., the bodies of the deceased were brought back to the country. Due to serious doubts about the objectivity and impartiality of the forensic medical examination conducted by Russian authorities, both the families and the Azerbaijani state initiated a request for a repeat forensic examination to be conducted domestically. Once the examination was completed, the bodies were taken to the Taza Pir Mosque. After prayers were recited, the deceased were transported to their native land.
Şəhər saat 3-ə qədər ardasa proses çəkdi. Daha sonra
Following the repatriation, a new forensic investigation was launched in Azerbaijan. The victims' relatives say the evidence contradicts official Russian claims.
Devletimizin kararı üzerine, yani daha çok devletin teşebbüsüyle.
Later, a forensic medical examination was carried out by a highly professional team in Azerbaijan. I personally participated in the identification of the bodies. Let me briefly add that while I cannot interfere with the work of the investigative authorities, I was an eyewitness to the condition of my brother's bodies. The severe signs of torture and multiple lethal injuries were plainly visible. It was with great pain that I realized they had been subjected to horrific abuse before they were killed. What is truly unfortunate is that the initial statement issued by the Russian side, claiming that they died due to stress or heart failure while in stable condition, was a blatant lie.
Azerbaijan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs promptly issued a formal protest and demanded a transparent and impartial investigation from the Russian side. The Russian chargé d'affaires in Baku was summoned to the ministry. The case doesn't end with the two fatalities. According to family members, others who survived the operation are now facing questionable legal proceedings, including one of the victims' brothers, who remains behind bars despite the expiration of his detention order.
There are also individuals who were seriously injured in the incident and remain in custody. A fabricated legal process is being carried out against them. One of them is my 61-year-old brother, Zakir Mehdi Oglu Safarov. Although the 72-hour pre-trial detention order has already expired, I suspect that artificial obstacles are being created to prevent his release. I hope this will not be the case, but I must admit my expectations are low.
This incident occurs amid growing tensions between Azerbaijan and Russia in recent months. It follows the December 2024 incident in which an Azerbaijani civilian aircraft was shot down in Russian-controlled airspace. Since then, diplomatic disagreements between Baku and Moscow have intensified. At the same time, there are growing reports of increased pressure and discrimination against Azerbaijanis living in Russia. Cases of forced conscription into the military, blackmail, and coercion, particularly targeting migrant workers, have been reported. Azerbaijani nationals are reportedly threatened with false drug charges or harm to family members to compel them into military service. Experts underline that the Yekaterinburg operation cannot be viewed solely as a criminal investigation. Baku expects full, transparent and legally grounded investigation, identification of those responsible and preventive measures to avoid similar incidents in the future. The repatriation of the Safarov brothers' bodies marks on the beginning of the legal and political process. How the situation evolves and whether it will further affect Azerbaijan-Russian relations remains a key question in the coming days.
As we reported earlier, Azerbaijan is demanding accountability after two of its citizens were killed and several others injured in what it calls a violent and unjustified raid by Russian security forces in Yekaterinburg. The raid provoked outrage in Baku over the treatment of Azerbaijani nationals.
Azerbaijan has strongly condemned what it calls a brutal and unjustified operation by Russian security forces in the city of Yekaterinburg. During the raid on Friday, 2 Azerbaijani nationals were killed, several others injured, and at least 9 were detained. The deadly operation, led by the Russian Federal Security Service, targeted over 10 homes belonging to Azerbaijani families, raising serious concerns about ethnic profiling and the use of excessive force. The victims, Ziadin and Hussein Safarov, were from a well-known Azerbaijani family, originally from Agdam. Their brother, Shakir, confirmed their deaths and is arranging to repatriate their bodies. Several other family members and compatriots remain in custody, with reports suggesting over 60 Azerbaijanis may have been detained. One of those detained and later released described being beaten and humiliated by security forces who allegedly entered without warrants and confiscated valuables, including money and gold. He also claimed that both he and his father were assaulted during the raid. Azerbaijan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned Russia's chargé d'affaires in Baku and issued a strong protest, demanding an immediate and transparent investigation. Officials accused Russian law enforcement of acting with disregard for legal standards and called the killings unacceptable. While the Russian Foreign Ministry claims the raids were part of an ongoing investigation into serious past crimes, allegedly involving Russian citizens of Azerbaijani origin, it has offered little clarity on the deaths or the violence used during the operation. Azerbaijan has called on Moscow to hold those responsible accountable and to guarantee the safety and legal rights of Azerbaijani citizens living in Russia.
One of the Azerbaijanis detained in Yekaterinburg and later released has shared details of alleged abuse at the hand of Russia's Federal Security Service. Vugar Safarov describes beatings, saying his father was tortured. Here's what Safarov said to Azerbaijan's Report news agency.
At first I didn't open the door, but when I saw they were breaking it down, I opened it myself. Everyone was wearing masks. They were from Russia's Federal Security Service. There were also 2 children at home. They beat us without asking anything. They slammed our heads on the floor. They hit us with chairs. They laid us down in dirty cars and said, "Eat this mud." In detention, they tortured us with electric shocks. They insulted us, hit our heads and said, "Do you like it?" They shouted, "Why did you come here?" I could hear my father screaming in the next room. He told them he had a stent in his heart, but they tortured that area with electric current. He screamed, "I'm dying," and only then they called an ambulance. He told me, "Son, they want to blame everything on me. All my ribs are broken." I saw his face. There wasn't a single spot left uninjured. They said I had to sign a contract and go to war. I told them I had donated 30,000 rubles for humanitarian aid. They said, "Why so little?" and beat me again. My father asked, "If I agree, will you release my son?" They said yes. That evening, Shahin Shiklinsky and his lawyer son came and got me and my brother out.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky conveyed condolences to Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev over the killing of Azerbaijanis in raids in Russia's Yekaterinburg. Zelensky also thanked Aliyev for Azerbaijan's support in the evacuation of Ukrainian citizens from Iran. The 2 leaders agreed to instruct their teams to hold a meeting of the Intergovernmental Commission in Baku soon. Mutual support for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of both countries was reaffirmed, with Zelensky also expressing gratitude for the humanitarian aid provided by Azerbaijan to his country. Azerbaijan's Ministry of Internal Affairs says it detained 2 organized criminal groups in Baku on suspicion of large-scale drug trafficking and online fraud operations. Authorities believe the suspects, Russian nationals, smuggled narcotics into Azerbaijan from Iran as part of a larger trafficking route. They are also accused of using online platforms to market drugs and carry out cyber-enabled financial crimes, targeting individuals and institutions. The investigation continues. Those Russian nationals detained in Baku earlier due to suspicions of drug trafficking and cyber fraud were brought to court. Our Aytan Shukurova has the details of the hearing.
8 individuals detained for drug transit from Iran have been brought to court. The suspects, including 2 Russian nationals, are accused of being part of an organized criminal group involved in trafficking narcotics through Azerbaijan and conducting online distribution. They also face charges related to cyber fraud. The Sabail District Court has ordered pre-trial detention for the suspects. Investigation and operational measures are ongoing.
2 of the Russian nationals detained have been remanded in custody for 4 months. Now, as detainees are being brought to court one by one and proceedings are ongoing for the remaining 6 individuals. Separately, the 2 Sputnik Azerbaijan staff members, Igor Kartavy and Yevgeny Belousov, who were detained on Monday, have been sent to pretrial detention for 4 months by a Baku court. They were arrested for operating illegally after the outlet's accreditation was revoked in February. Police raided the Sputnik Baku office as part of the investigation. Authorities say the outlet's closure was intended to balance Russian media presence in Azerbaijan with access for Azerbaijani state media in Russia. To talk on the latest surrounding the Yekaterinburg case and tensions between Baku and Moscow, we're joined by Ahmad Alili of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Center in Baku. Welcome, thank you so much for being with us. Now, as things stand, where do you see the situation leading to when it comes to relations between Azerbaijan and Russia?
Well, we are in totally uncharted territories, frankly speaking. So, Azerbaijani-Russian relations, they used to have very solid foundation. And there have been quite many, let's say, ups and downs, but the developments that Azerbaijan-Russian relations could be characterized for the last 15 years, and that what we are witnessing now, this is a total new chapter in these relations. And I would say that there might be, of course, like that we expect that there will be certain softening in positions. I expect that because this level of the high tensions, I don't expect that it's going to continue for some time, but definitely we are witnessing emergence of a new norm in Russia-Azerbaijan relations. But again, we are in uncharted territories, and prognosing something how it will develop in the future, it's quite hard question, frankly speaking.
Well, a lot of things are happening here. It's a very fluid situation. Alleged murder and torture, arrests, cancellation of visits. What would you say would be the way out, or a way to the softening, as you put it?
I would say that Russian side, especially President Putin's call, is well expected in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan expects that what happened in December 2024, when Russian air defense system shut down Azerbaijani civilian airplane, and also all those atrocities which were carried out against Azerbaijanis in Yekaterinburg, they are going to be recognized, and that the Russian Federation is going to take certain actions in this regard. So, but everything started with the Azerbaijan civilian airplane being shut down. And if Russia believes that by not talking, but simply letting it go, things are going to magically go back to the place where they were, like in December 2024, no, it's not going to happen. So Azerbaijan expects that there will be official apology for what happened, and of course compensations paid for the families of victims. So those are the very first steps. But I also expect that there is quite strong diaspora members in Azerbaijan diaspora members in Russia, quite a strong Russian community in Azerbaijan. I believe that their resources also might be part of those efforts if the sides decide to soften this tension.
Thank you so much for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much.
And now on the matter of the Azerbaijani airliner, an audio recording claiming to capture an order to shoot down the Azal aircraft in December of 2024 surfaced on social media. According to an Azerbaijani media outlet, Minval.az, the recording suggests a command was given to target the civilian plane that had entered Russian airspace. In the audio, a speaker is heard saying, "Fire, missed. Fire again, once more, launch confirmed." The independent Russian outlet Agentstvo has confirmed that Captain Dmitry Paladichuk, mentioned in Minval's report, indeed served in air defense units. The incident in question dates back to December last year, when an Azal passenger jet carrying numerous passengers came under the impact of an unknown object and crashed, leaving casualties and injuries. So far, there has been no official statement from authorities regarding the audio tape. Meanwhile, a letter has also surfaced, allegedly containing the written explanation of an air defense captain, asserting that fire was opened on the aircraft following an order from Russia's Ministry of Defense. Anyways, here's the audio tape in question.
Алло. Азимут 338, дальность 7000, высота 400. 90, скорость 118, курсом на 230. Да, дальность уже 7. Огонь! Огонь, говорю! Есть ход!
Пропущено.
Пропущено! Повторно! Еще раз огонь!
Есть огонь.
Following the tragic incident involving the Azal flight, Baku-Moscow relations began to deteriorate. Azerbaijani officials say they had determined that the plane was hit mid-flight by a Russian missile, while Kremlin media blamed technical issues, citing an alleged transcript. However, experts saw that as part of a familiar pattern of denial in past aviation tragedies.
On 1 September 1983, a Korean Airlines Boeing 747 was en route from Anchorage to Seoul when it strayed off course into Soviet airspace near Sakhalin Island. The USSR's response: a Soviet Su-15 fighter jet piloted by Major Gennady Osipovich was dispatched to intercept the aircraft. Despite the fact that the Boeing 747 was a civilian airliner, Soviet authorities perceived it as a spy aircraft, allegedly confusing it with an American RC-135 reconnaissance jet. Osipovich fired 2 missiles, bringing the plane down. All 269 passengers and crew perished. For days, Moscow refused to acknowledge responsibility, with Soviet Defense Minister Dmitry Ustinov pushing for complete denial in Politburo meetings. When the truth became undeniable, General Nikolai Ogarkov took the stage, claiming the aircraft was on a deliberate spy mission coordinated by Washington and Tokyo. It wasn't until 1990, amid perestroika, that Mikhail Gorbachev formally admitted Soviet responsibility. By then, the damage to the USSR's international reputation had already been done. Fast forward 3 decades, and another Boeing, another missile, and another denial. On 17th July 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH17, a Boeing 777, was flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur when it was shot down over eastern Ukraine. The aircraft was at 33,000 feet, cruising over Donetsk, an area controlled by Russian-backed separatists, when it suddenly disappeared from radar. The wreckage was scattered over a 50 square kilometer area. All 298 people on board, including 193 Dutch nationals, 43 Malaysians, and 27 Australians, were killed instantly. International investigators quickly determined that the aircraft had been struck by a Buk surface-to-air missile, a system used by Russia's 53rd Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade based in Kursk. Russia's reaction followed a familiar pattern: initial denial. Moscow claimed Ukrainian forces had shot down the plane. Disinformation campaigns, Russian state media pushed dozens of alternative theories, including claims that a Ukrainian fighter jet had attacked MH17. Fabricated evidence. Russian authorities even produced radar and satellite images attempting to shift the blame, many of which were later debunked. Obstruction of justice. Moscow refused to cooperate with international investigations and blocked UN resolutions aimed at holding those responsible accountable. After years of investigation, a Dutch-led joint investigation team, JET, concluded that the missile system had been transported from Russia into Ukraine and fired by separatist forces. In November 2022, a Dutch court convicted 3 pro-Russian separatists in absentia for their role in the attack. But Moscow has never admitted responsibility, echoing the denials of 1983. Now, in 2024, another passenger aircraft tragedy unfolds, and the playbook remains unchanged. The Azerbaijan Airlines flight 8243 crash near Aktau bore clear similarities to the previous incidents. Preliminary findings indicated that the plane was struck by a Russian surface-to-air missile, SAM, over Chechnya before it lost control. High-resolution images from the crash site further supported the external explosion theory. Aviation experts noted that the nature of the debris pattern and impact sites were consistent with a mid-air detonation caused by an external strike, ruling out engine failure or onboard detonation. Then came Putin's apology to Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev, an implicit admission of responsibility, though not a public acknowledgement. Yet now, days later, a new Russian narrative emerges, a transcript leak implying a technical malfunction rather than an external attack, a media campaign to shift public perception. Going on with initial alternative theories, including claims that a bird strike caused an engine failure or that a fuel tank explosion led to the crash, despite evidence pointing to an external impact. No official confirmation, just strategic ambiguity, the same approach used for MH17 and KAL 007. Azerbaijan's government remains unmoved by these shifting Russian explanations. President Ilham Aliyev has made it clear.
Bugün biz tam açık-aydın diyebiliriz ki Rusya tarafından terör vuruldu.
We can clearly say today that the plane was shot down by Russia. This is a fact, and no one can deny this fact. Again, we are not saying that this was done intentionally, but it was done. We have clearly expressed our demands to the Russian side. These demands were officially communicated to them on the 27th of December. What do these demands consist of? First of all, the Russian side must apologize to Azerbaijan. Secondly, it must acknowledge its guilt. Thirdly, those responsible must be punished, brought to criminal responsibility, and compensation must be paid to the Azerbaijani state, to the injured passengers and crew members.
Ve Azerbaycan devletine ve zarar çeken sərnişin ve ekipaj üzvlerine tazminat ödemelidir.
Will Russia acknowledge responsibility this time? With historical precedent in mind, the Aktau crash raises the same question as before. Will Moscow admit responsibility like it eventually did in 1990? Or will it continue the denialist playbook of 2014, refusing to take the blame indefinitely? The world is watching. The families of the victims deserve the truth.
On the Yekaterinburg raid and Azerbaijan-Russia relations, we earlier spoke to Paul Goebel, an expert on ethnic and religious issues in the former Soviet space. Here's what he had to say.
But this seems to have been a particularly violent display of power, likely intended to intimidate ethnic Azerbaijanis in the Russian Federation, to force them to keep quiet lest they too fall victim. Not surprisingly, Baku was outraged by the behavior of the officials and by the growing xenophobia against Azerbaijanis and all non-Russians from the south, both the Caucasus and Central Asia. Azerbaijani-Russian relations have been becoming tense not only because of this incident and the shooting down of the Azerbaijani Airliner, but also because there have been regular attacks by ordinary Russians or Russians in nationalist organizations on ethnic Azerbaijanis who are living and working in the Russian Federation. Moscow is losing control over more and more of the former Soviet space at a rapid rate. And of course, it's angry. Of course, it isn't going to ever admit that it's responsible for that its own thuggish behavior toward ethnic minorities from abroad and at home, and its brutal war in Ukraine has driven non-Russians away from it. Moscow has been reluctant, increasingly reluctant, to accept the new reality that has emerged over the last 3 decades. The 11 former Soviet republics have moved further and further away from Moscow precisely because of Moscow's behavior. The problem that those grappling with how to improve relations between Moscow and the governments of Azerbaijan and the others is that it requires that Moscow change its approach, change its policy, fully recognize the independence of these countries, and act to them as another foreign country. Moscow is not able to do that, and under Putin, it is less able to do it today than it was 5 years ago.
On to other news. The Economic Cooperation Organization is gathering momentum in Azerbaijan ahead of its summit set for July 3rd and 4th in Hankendi. With ECO Week underway, the focus of delegates from 10 member states gathering in Agdam was on youth, innovation, and future leadership.
The Economic Cooperation Organization, also known as ECO member countries, gathered in Karabakh region of Azerbaijan ahead of 17th summit. Actually called ECO Week, in upcoming couple of days a series of thematic events are being held across multiple cities. These include youth and women's forums and a regional business summit. Events stretching to 1 week kicked off in Agdam with Youth Forum. Azerbaijan's Youth and Sports Minister Farid Gayibov and ECO Secretary-General Asad Majid Khan opened the forum with optimistic remarks, expressing confidence in a bright future for the region's youth.
This summit is taking place at a particularly difficult time, I would say, for the region. So this is also an occasion for the region to show solidarity with the member states, and the leaders will come together here to provide us with guidance on how best to bring the region even more closer together in pursuing our goals of development and prosperity.
Kazakhstan is proud to be an active participant in this initiative. Right now, we're working on a key document, a strategic action plan that will help build a unified approach to developing this sector. Youth involvement is a top priority, but we also face serious challenges, like tackling unemployment and ensuring young people's well-being and prosperity.
Key discussions revolve around trade cooperation, sustainability and youth mobility, with a strong emphasis on tackling climate change and leveraging technology.
The Agdam City Hall welcomed nearly 80 delegates from member states and local institutions, including students of the newly established Karabakh University.
I'm very excited, and we are here for to share our information about the eco in our strands, in our countries, and to share this information with Azerbaijan. I think it will be very interesting and informative for both of us.
I am from Karabakh University, and as a student, it's really honorable to be a participant here. And today we are gathered together in order to discuss such important issues related to ecology and human development. I think that in this region it's really important to discuss these important issues and come up with some applicable solutions, and as a result of that, in the future young generations can make a positive impact on the region.
So I'm very excited for this forum because this is a big milestone, once in a 10 years opportunity, because this year youth will be participating in writing suggestions for the ECO 10-year plan. So I'm very excited because we will be working together in working groups with experts and policymakers to draft our recommendations. And I think we bring a lot to the table because we're the generation to live through all of these years.
The forum aims to empower young leaders to shape the region's future through innovative ideas, policy input, and digital solutions. A panel discussions about the role of youth in regional development was held as part of Forum. By the end of the event, participants presented a set of recommendations for the Economic Cooperation Organization's 2026 to 2035 strategic vision. The 17th summit of the organization, which will be held on July the 3rd and the 4th, brings together presidents, prime ministers, ministers, and more officials. It's here that strategic decisions are expected to be made.
A senior delegation from Afghanistan has departed for Azerbaijan to attend the Economic Cooperation Organization's summit, marking a significant moment in the country's foreign engagement since the Taliban's return to power in 2021. Our Tamim Bahiz has more in Kabul.
A high-ranking Afghan delegation led by Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs Mullah Abdul Ghani brother left for Azerbaijan on Tuesday morning to take part in the 17th summit of the Economic Cooperation Organization. The trip comes at the official invitation of the Azerbaijani government and is seen as a major diplomatic step for the Taliban-led de facto authorities, as it will be the first time Taliban officials participate in such a regional summit since regaining control of Afghanistan nearly 4 years ago. The Deputy Prime Minister's office say Mullah brother is scheduled to address the ECO summit's general session and will also meet with Azerbaijani officials to discuss expanding bilateral ties in areas like trade, energy, and infrastructure. The 17th ECO summit will be held in Baku on July 3rd and 4th and will bring together heads of state and top officials from member countries across Central and South Asia, the Middle East, and the Caucasus. Afghanistan has been a member of the ECO since 1992 and previously took part in several high-level summits under past governments. However, it was absent from the 2021 and 2023 meetings following the collapse of the previous administration and the Taliban's return to power. This marks a critical test of regional recognition for the interim Afghan government as it continues to seek legitimacy and economic cooperation amid ongoing international isolation. This is Tamim Bahiz in Kabul for AnewZ.
Raging wildfires in Turkish regions of Hatay and Izmir are threatening hundreds of homes. As thousands of residents are being evacuated, officials say firefighting efforts and damage assessments are ongoing.
On Monday evening, wildfires broke out near homes in Turkey's Hatay region. Turkey's disaster management agency, AFAD, announced that more than 50,000 people have been evacuated from 5 regions, including over 42,000 from Izmir.
We have carried out the evacuations. We have evacuated 20 houses so far, and we are housing these citizens at residence halls. Other than that, we are also meeting their needs.
In Izmir, strong winds made the fires worse for the second day. Several villages and neighborhoods were evacuated. 21 people hurt by the fires were treated and released from hospitals. Some homes were badly damaged by the fires.
It is very sad. We were really upset. We have 40 years of memories here. Our children grew up here. I spent my youth here. I can only turn my back to it. I cannot look at it. That is how much it pains me. Let this be a lesson to people. Please question it, especially those who have a house, live in fire zones.
A 40-year investment was destroyed here. It is not possible to repair this place anymore. What can be done here? I guess there is damage to nearly 100 houses here. What can the state do as support? What can be done? That's it. If precautions can be taken for this not to happen again, these should be taken.
Forestry Minister Ibrahim Yumaklis said 4 villages and 3 neighborhoods were evacuated as a safety measure. 21 people affected by the fire have left the hospital. Firefighters are still fighting the wildfires along the Aegean coast.
Şu ana kadar Until now, I had said that 4 villages and 3 neighborhoods were evacuated as a precaution. Damage assessment work is being done by teams. Our environment and urbanization teams will go out into the field after the information that the fires are contained. 21 citizens who said they were affected by the fire due to smoke or other reasons have all returned home after outpatient treatment.
Ayakta tedaviyle evlerine geri dönmüş durumda.
In Izmir, firefighting efforts involve 4 planes, 14 helicopters, and 106 fire trucks. Strong winds prevent air units from combating wildfires. Because of the fires, 4 villages and 2 neighborhoods were evacuated. Flights at Izmir airport were paused due to smoke and fog. Experts say hotter, drier summers from climate change are causing more wildfires. Winds up to 100 kilometers per hour made firefighting harder on June 29th. Over 1,000 firefighters with planes and helicopters are working to control the fires. 3 people were treated for smoke inhalation and released the same day. Locals have also been helping fight the fires near homes.
Russia continued with its strikes on Ukraine. Russian forces struck the town of Huliaipole with ballistic missiles, causing casualties and damage to homes and public buildings. Russians also shelled residential areas in Kostiantynivka, injuring 3 people during an hour-long artillery attack. In Pokrovsk, Russian drones targeted the White Angel evacuation crew, injuring a policeman and causing a civilian to die from blood loss. Russia has sharply escalated its aerial strikes campaign on Ukraine, launching a record of more than 5,300 drones in June alone, the highest monthly total since the start of the full-scale invasion, according to Ukraine's Air Force.
Russia launched a record 5,337 drones at Ukraine in June alone. The surge signals a new phase of sustained and intensified aerial attacks. According to Ukraine's Air Force, this represents a sharp escalation, a 27% increase compared to the previous peak of 4,198 drones launched in March. Speaking at a press conference in Kyiv with German Foreign Minister Johannes Vadful, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said that in the past 18 months there have been only 2 days without missile or drone strikes on Ukraine. The month began with deadly shellings. On June 3rd in Sumy, Russian attacks killed 4 civilians, including children, and wounded 28 others. On June 17th, Kyiv suffered its deadliest strike since the war began. Over 440 drones and 32 missiles targeted the capital during a 9-hour assault, killing at least 28 people and injuring more than 100. The city mourned deeply as families grieved for loved ones lost and communities faced widespread destruction. A few days later, on June 23rd, another wave struck Kyiv and Chernihiv with 352 drones and 16 missiles. This attack killed at least 7 civilians, injured 31, and hit residential areas, hospitals, and sports complexes. On June 24th, southeastern Ukraine was hit hard. Airstrikes on the Dnipropetrovsk region killed 17 people and wounded over 200, including 18 children, damaging schools, hospitals, and a passenger train. In Sumy, a separate drone attack killed a toddler and 2 adults. On June 29th, Russia launched its largest single-day aerial attack so far, sending 477 drones and 60 missiles across multiple regions, including Lviv, Poltava, and Cherkasy. The bombardment caused widespread damage and left several injured. A Ukrainian F-16 pilot died defending the skies during the assault. These were the attacks with the highest impact, but Ukraine has faced drone and missile strikes almost every day throughout June. Despite Ukraine's air defences intercepting hundreds of drones and missiles, many still broke through, damaging homes, metro stations and schools.
Now over to the Middle East, where Israeli airstrikes killed at least 74 people in the Gaza Strip on Monday, according to local officials. Authorities say that more than 34 people, including women, children, and journalists, were killed at a cafe by the sea. Meanwhile, the White House confirmed that President Donald Trump is in contact with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and is working to end the conflict. The Israeli army has ordered people in the north of the Strip to evacuate, claiming they are preparing to fight Hamas in Gaza City. Qatar and Egypt are still mediating talks, but a new ceasefire remains elusive. During a meeting with military officials in Tel Aviv, Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran has 3 plans to destroy Israel: encircling it, attacking with missiles, and using nuclear threats. He added that while U.S. support is helpful, it's not required. He called Israel's recent military actions a historic success, referring to the series of strikes on Iran and its nuclear sites that began on June 13th, killing military commanders, nuclear scientists, and civilians. Iran responded with missile attacks. The U.S. joined the Israeli campaign on June 22nd, striking nuclear facilities, and a ceasefire between Israel and Iran was declared 2 days later. G7 foreign ministers released a statement supporting the Israel-Iran ceasefire, urging for renewed nuclear talks.
The group of 7 foreign ministers publicly released a statement backing the ceasefire between Israel and Iran and calling for the immediate resumption of talks to reach a comprehensive, verifiable and durable agreement on Iran's nuclear program. The ceasefire, brokered and announced by US President Donald Trump last week, paused a conflict that erupted on the 13th of June when Israeli forces launched strikes inside Iran. That attack triggered retaliation, including Iranian missile strikes on a US military base in Qatar and US airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites. According to the G7's joint statement, all parties must avoid actions that could further destabilize the region. Washington's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, described recent US-Iranian talks as promising and expressed hope for a long-term diplomatic resolution. Iran maintains that its nuclear program is peaceful, while Israel and its allies insist on preventing Tehran from developing nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, tensions escalated further when a hardline Iranian newspaper demanded that Rafael Grossi, the head of the UN nuclear watchdog, be tried and executed as an Israeli agent. The G7 condemned the threats and reiterated their support for the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Iran's foreign minister has ruled out that talks with the U.S. would resume quickly, but said the doors of diplomacy will remain open. Our Turash Ralilu has the details in Tehran.
Iran's foreign minister said there is no fast return to diplomacy, rejecting U.S. President Donald Trump's suggestion on resumption of talks as soon as this week. In an interview with CBS News, Araqchi said, "I don't think negotiations will restart as soon as that. We still need more time." Mr. Araqchi also said the U.S. should first ensure that it will not resort to attacking Iran in the middle of the talks. Iranian and U.S. negotiators were scheduled to hold their 6th round of indirect negotiations in Oman on 15th of June. However, those talks were delayed and cancelled after Israel attacked Iran on 13th of June. Later, the U.S. became a side in the war against Iran when it attacked Iran's nuclear sites on 21st of June. Also, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Majid Takhravanchi said no date has been set for talks between Iran and U.S. Speaking to BBC World Service, he said that the U.S. side, through mediators, has informed that it wants talks this week. Mr. Takhravanchi also said that the U.S. must address the very basic question of attacking Iran during the talks and clear its stand on that point. After Iran turned out US President's suggestion for talks this week, Mr. Trump said that he is neither talking to Iran nor offering Iran anything. However, White House spokeswoman said that Mr. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, has been in communication with Iranian side, both directly and indirectly. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
According to US and Israeli officials, Donald Trump is set to host Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington next week. On the visit amid Trump's push for an end to the Gaza war, we're talking with Osama Rizvi, an energy and economic analyst coming to us from Lahore. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, some are calling this visit a victory lap for Netanyahu following the war with Iran. However, there are conflicting reports of the effect the campaign had on Iran's nuclear program. What do you expect from this visit?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show today. And let's put the facts straight. Calling this a victory lap does not suffice and does not speak to the reality that happened. You know, there were 2 to 3 purposes of the recent war. One was unconditional surrender. The other one was the dismantling of the nuclear program in Iran. And the third one that was suggested was the regime change. We see, and this is a fact, that none of these 3 were achieved. Hence, I do not believe that we can say that this is a victory lap. And, you know, this would be an exaggeration to say the least. Moving forward, I believe there are so many moving pieces and we don't know exactly what will happen. It's anybody's conjecture. It's anybody's guess. So I think we have to wait and watch. In terms of the nuclear program, it's a very complicated thing. Both sides, both countries have to save their face in terms of their popularity at home, but also have to face the hard economic and diplomatic realities. So let's see where does the balance strikes.
What kind of talks do you see possibly happening here between Washington and Tehran, and what kind of a deal can be struck given that Tehran says it will not stop enriching uranium and Washington had previously demanded zero enrichment?
Well, if both countries decide to do something practically, I would believe that Iran would not give up its uranium enrichment at all. So maybe both countries would have to meet halfway. The Iranian side would continue to enrich uranium, but they may agree to harsher or stricter scrutiny by the IAEA, and the US can also agree to this point. Now, one of the most important things in this scenario would be the oil prices, you know, because even 2 or 3 cents of an increase in oil price can result into billions of loss in consumer spending back in the US. The US economy and the US consumer is in quite a trouble because of the increased tariffs. So Trump would be avoiding any move that can result in higher oil prices. That is why I believe that Iran does have a card here, but also they should not go, you know, very casual about this or cavalier about this, because Trump would want some sort of a deal. So the best way would be to meet halfway, continue enriching the uranium, but agreeing to more stricter visits by the IAEA.
Washington is turning its attention now over to Gaza. We've also heard some voices in Israel saying that the military campaign is nearing its end. Could this visit be maybe one of the final steps in Washington's push for a ceasefire?
Well, I really, really hope so that this happens, because what's happening there is absolutely atrocious. But coming towards your question and coming towards the reality of the things, I believe it would not be that easy. Even if such a truce happens, no one knows that when it will be violated, and we have had precedents for that as well in the previous truces. So I would want, as anybody other, you know, would want to have a truce, but you know, there are lots of moving pieces. I think we will need more than one meeting for this to happen.
Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Donald Trump has signed an executive order terminating a U.S. sanctions program on Syria, allowing an end to the country's isolation from the international financial system. The move, welcomed by Damascus, aims to boost investment and reconstruction efforts more than 6 months after the ousting of Bashar al-Assad. The sanctions have been in place since before Syria's civil war and had crippled the country's economy. The U.S. Treasury said more than 500 individuals and entities have already been removed from the sanctions list. Separately, the sanctions on Syria relating to Assad, his associates, ISIS, and Iran remain in place. With much of Syria still in ruins after years of war and a devastating earthquake, the easing of sanctions is seen as a crucial step towards recovery. One of the many examples of extensive damage in the capital is the Abbasiyin Stadium.
Syria's Abbasiyin Stadium in Damascus, once a symbol of sporting pride, now lies in ruins. Built in 1957, it was the country's oldest stadium and hosted international football matches before the war. During the conflict, the stadium was converted into a military base under the ousted Bashar al-Assad, with artillery batteries stationed across its grounds. Its strategic location linked the city centre to key neighbourhoods that became focal points of the uprising. Former Syrian national footballer Nabil Al-Sunni recalled the stadium's glory days before the war, remembering packed stands and dramatic cup finals.
We are deeply saddened by the stadium's conversion into a military barracks, which has been out of service since 2012. We played 3 cup finals. The stadium was packed and the matches were dramatic. There was definitely a special atmosphere. It was one of the most beautiful finals, like the Republic Cup, and people still remember it to this day.
In Aleppo, the destruction is equally visible. 14 years of civil war and a devastating earthquake have left mountains of rubble clogging streets and hindering reconstruction. Syrian civil defense teams estimate that it will take at least a year to clear just 40% of the debris from main roads. The rubble is not only blocking access, but also raising serious health risks.
Environmental damages, the spread of pollution and rodents, preventing people from returning to their homes or getting back to their normal life. Unexploded ordnance due to bombardment and planes' airstrikes spread in this place might explode at any moment, affecting children, women in the residential neighborhoods. There is also the issue of the psychological state and the lack of hope felt by the community with the existence of this rubble.
Despite the scale of the challenge, small initiatives are underway. A local recycling plant in Aleppo is turning rubble into concrete blocks and pavement tiles to help rebuild neighbourhoods. Meanwhile, following the recent easing of US sanctions, Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa has pledged to provide support for both national and foreign investment in reconstruction efforts.
The 4th International Conference on Financing for Development in Seville resulted in an agreement that will enable developing nations to borrow money for national investment without crippling debt burdens. The Seville commitment was launched by the UN's Secretary General.
A global agreement to accelerate financing and sustainable development has been launched in Spain at the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, known as FFD4, on Monday. The Sevilla Commitment is a document that the United Nations chief says marks progress beyond previous global efforts. However, speaking from Seville, Secretary-General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, said that sustainable development can only come when there is sustainable peace and called for unified support to end global conflicts.
At a time of profound global turmoil, we must keep working for peace. For peace in the Middle East, for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate release of all hostages, and unimpeded humanitarian access as a first step to achieve the two-state solution.
He said the Sevilla Platform of Action will include dozens of new initiatives, including a dedicated forum for countries to coordinate debt strategies.
With the adoption of the Sevilla Commitment document, countries are proving their dedication to getting the engine of development reviving again. Through new domestic and global commitments that can channel public and private finance to the areas of greatest need. By overhauling the world's approach to debt, to make borrowing work in service of sustainable development.
The Secretary-General also noted that 11 actionable proposals are ready to tackle the deepening debt crisis, with backing from major economies, including G20 members. In closing, Guterres urged powerful nations to lead the transformation now rather than resist it later when global power dynamics inevitably shift.
Europe is sweltering under one of the most intense heat waves ever, with record-breaking temperatures gripping several countries. Millions on the continent are feeling the impact.
A prolonged heat wave tightened its grip on Europe on Monday, driving temperatures to record-breaking levels and prompting health warnings across several countries. Spain recorded a national June temperature record on Sunday, with El Granado, near the Portuguese border, reaching 46 degrees Celsius. Portugal placed 7 districts under a red heat warning, with Lisbon facing persistently extremely high temperatures. In Germany, southern and western regions were under heat alerts, with the German Weather Service predicting highs of up to 39 degrees Celsius later in the week. At the Berlin Zoo, keepers showered elephants and handed out ice treats to animals to help them cope with the heat. In Belgium, staff at a retirement home north of Brussels set up a paddling pool for elderly residents to cool their feet. Outdoor activities were cancelled as temperatures climbed, and staff noted many residents were becoming lethargic or unwell from the heat. Britain experienced the peak of a 4-day heat wave, with temperatures hitting 33 degrees Celsius at London's Heathrow Airport on Monday. People sought relief in parks and by the sea, with Brighton Beach drawing sunbathers and swimmers over the weekend. Meteorologists attributed the heat wave to a heat dome, a high-pressure system trapping hot air over the region.
It's not just affecting one area, it's quite a wide area of Europe struggling with these very high temperatures at the moment, which according to Climate Central, if you take a look at the previous temperatures over like decades, we can see that these temperatures are 3 to 5 times more likely than they would have been without the impact of human-induced climate change. So we're seeing these higher temperatures as a direct consequence of climate change.
Relief is expected for some areas by midweek as rain and cooler weather moves in.
Well, that is all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching, and do stay tuned to AnewZ.